So normally, when we're in church, we like to focus on all the wonderful things that the Lord does for us and all of the blessings that He gives to His church. And we're still going to make sure we remember those things today, but today's reading from the Word is actually a pretty sad story. It's the story of the Lord's holy city, the city Jerusalem, being attacked by the Babylonians. And what had happened was that the people of Judah had bad kings for generations. The king kept on not listening to the Lord's word, and prophets like Elijah and Elisha were sent, and they warned the kings, you have to turn back and follow the Lord. But the kings just kept on not listening. And the prophets said, bad things are going to happen if you don't listen. And they kept on not listening. And then at last, the army of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, did come against Israel, against Judah. And the king of Israel, he had been sort of serving Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. They made an agreement. But then Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, he rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar. So Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, he came with his army to punish Jehoiakim. And it says, and Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came against the city as his servants were besieging it. And Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, and his mother, and his servants, and his princes, and his officers, went out to the king of Babylon, and the king of Babylon, in the 8th year of his reign, took him prisoner. And he carried out from there all the treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king's house, and he cut in pieces all the articles of gold which Solomon, king of Israel, had made in the temple of the Lord, as the Lord had said. And also he carried into captivity all Jerusalem, all the captains and all the mighty men of valor, 10,000 captives, and all the craftsmen and smiths. None remained except the poorest people of the land. So that's not very good. King of Babylon came to Jerusalem, and the people surrendered to him, and he took the king prisoner. And then he came into the temple, and he took all of the precious things out of the temple, because the temple was full of beautiful gold things, and the king of Babylon wanted that gold. So just imagine if someone came into our church and he took the altar and the candlesticks and the chairs, he took the pulpits, he took the pews, carried everything out of this church. And then, unfortunately, things got even worse, because when the king of Babylon conquered Jerusalem the first time, he made a new king named Zedekiah. But Zedekiah also rebelled, and so Nebuchadnezzar came back a second time. And so we read, it came to pass in the 9th year of his reign, in the 10th month, on the 10th day of the month, that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and all his army came against Jerusalem and encamped against it, and they built a siege wall against it all around. And the city was besieged until the 11th year of King Zedekiah. By the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine had become so severe in the city that there was no food for the people of the land. And then the wall of the city was broken through, and all the men of war fled at night by way of the gate between two walls, which was by the king's garden, even though the Chaldeans, or the Babylonians, were still encamped all around the city. And the king went out by way of the plain, but the army of the Chaldeans pursued the king, and they overtook him in the plains of Jericho. All his army was scattered from him. So that next king, Zedekiah, he was also captured and taken prisoner. And then it says, in the 5th month, on the 7th day of the month, which was the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, a servant of the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem. He burned the house of the Lord and the king's house, all the houses of Jerusalem, that is, all the houses of the great, he burned with fire. And all the army of the Chaldeans who were with the captain of the guard broke down the walls of Jerusalem all around. So that second time, they'd already taken all of the gold from the temple, so they just burned it. They burned the house of the Lord. What an awful thing, to burn down the Lord's holy temple. In this story, it sure seems like the bad guys win. But that's not okay, right? That's not how it's supposed to go. The Lord doesn't let the bad guys win. Do you think that the Lord will ever make it so that the bad guys win and there's nothing we can do to make things right again? Does he let that happen? Does he make it so there's nothing we can do to make things right again? While we live in this world, no, he doesn't. There's always a chance for us to let the Lord back into our lives. But sometimes things are kind of bad for a long time. Sometimes if we choose to not listen to the Lord, things are sad, and they stay sad. And in a way, it's actually very good that we're talking about this right before we start the Christmas season, because when the temple of Jerusalem was burned and the people of Jerusalem were captured, carried away captives, that was kind of like the low point of the Old Testament, the saddest point of the Old Testament, and things stayed sad until the Lord was born. Things stayed, the children of Israel stayed in darkness. They stayed exiles. They didn't have a real church or real worship of the Lord until the Lord was born. And he came to show us, to remind us what being a real church, what being loving people is really all about. And so when we celebrate the Lord at Christmas time, it's important to remember that he came because these really sad things had happened and we needed help. We needed to be shown new light. We needed to be reminded how to love. But before the Lord came, things were sad for a long time. And it's not a lot of fun, but we do need to remember that when we make choices that hurt other people, or when we choose to turn away from the Lord, sometimes bad things happen. Sometimes our lives get sad as a result of that. And the Lord will never let the bad guys win so completely that we can't fix the problem. We may have to go through a long time waiting for new light, but the Lord will be born in our hearts, and there will be new truths given to us. There will be something new that can show us how to start over. And as we get close to Christmas time, let's remember to say thank you to the Lord for rescuing us from those sad times, those hard times that we sometimes make when we're not very good at listening. Amen.